Let's take a look at reading files using for loops. First, let's talk about the mechanics of a for loop, because that can be kind of confusing. For, initializer, semicolon, Boolean test, semicolon, increment. Then you have the body of the loop. Now the body of the loop will be enclosed in curly braces if there's more than one statement, or could be a single statement without curly braces. Those rules probably sound familiar because they're the same rules for while loops and for conditional statements. Now here's where for loops get a little tricky. The initializer and the test are done before the loop body. This is similar to a while loop. But at the end of the loop body, the increment is done and then the test is done. Now the order of these operations is very important. Let me show you a picture to help you understand how this works. Here's a code fragment that adds 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. Int sum is 0. Here's our for loop. Int count equals 1, count less than or equal to 5, plus plus count. And the body of the loop is just a single statement, sum plus equals count, which remember means the same thing as sum equals sum plus count. Here's how the for loop gets executed. Sum gets set to 0. Then count is created and set to 1. We check count less than or equal to 5, which is true because 1 is less than or equal to 5. Now we go and do the loop body. So we add the 1 in count to the 0 in sum, and sum now has the value of 1. Then we go do the increment. Count gets incremented to 2. And then we check to see that count is less than or equal to 5, which it is. So at that point, we go and do the loop body again. Sum now gets 2 added to 1, so it goes up to 3. Count gets incremented to 3. And then we check to see, is count less than or equal to 5? Well, 3 is less than or equal to 5, so we go and do the body again. So sum now has 3 added to 3, which is 6. Then we increment count to 4, and 4 is less than or equal to 5. That's true. So we go and do the body again. So now we add 4 to 6 and get 10. Increment count to 5. Check to see if count is less than or equal to 5, which it is, because 5 is less than or equal to 5. So we add 5 to 10 in the body of the loop, which gives us 15. Increment count to 6, and then check to see if count is less than or equal to 5. Well, 6 is not less than or equal to 5, and so we're done. So you can see the loop when you see the triangles at the side, how you're going around and around and around again. Also notice that the initialization is only done once. Now let's talk a little bit about files. Files are used to store data. So for example, every word processor has its own file. Now the format of the file has to be known, and these formats can be incredibly complicated. Data in files is stored sequentially, and so you read in the first data element first, then the second, and so on. The thing that's tricky here is you can't go backwards in a file, although you can start over if you really have to, but you don't want to do that very often. Files are also a finite size, so that's something that's very different than keyboard input that we've been using so far that could be entered as many times as you want. Finding out how much data is in a file can be a problem, so we have a trick that we use. What we do is we store the size of the file at the start of the file. Now this is usually stored as an int. This trick is very, very widely used in programming. So to create a file in Eclipse, you'll do File, New, File, and then save the file with the .txt extension. .txt means that characters are being stored. There's a different format, .dat, when data is being stored, but .txt is what we're going to use exclusively this semester. It's very important to get the correct extension on files so people know how to interpret the files. This is another way of determining the formatting. So here's what the body of the file will look like. Now remember that first 5 is the size. The others are the data in the file. So 5 tells us that there are 5 data elements, and then the data elements are 3, 1, 7, 9, and 3. Now let's talk a little bit about the scanner class. The scanner class, in addition to reading keyboard input, is also used to read files, but it uses a different constructor. The other thing is we have to import java.io.file in addition to importing java.util.scanner. So here's what this looks like. Scanner input equals new scanner, new file of, and then the file name with a .txt extension. Now there's some nuances here that we don't really know very well, and that's okay. Just remember the scanner needs to have the file constructed first. Now the file class is going to look in the project directory, not the source directory where your Java files are being stored. This is something that's specific to Eclipse. Now there is one little detail that we have to attend to. It's called a file not found exception. It turns out that Java is absolutely crazy about worrying that files aren't going to be found. So it forces you to inform the world that somehow you're opening a file and that may not be successful. This is done with something that's called a file not found exception. So in order to use this, you're going to have to import java.io.filenotfound exception. Now, you're going to have to go after the public static void main, string square bracket args, and say throws file not found exception. If the file was opened in another method, that method and all of the methods that call it also have to throw this exception. So this is going to get scattered all over your code. The good news here is that Eclipse can really help you find where all these things are and will help you get those exceptions in the right place. Let's read a file. Let's write a program that averages the integer values in a file using a for loop and that counts up to the file size. Now the file format is going to be size and then the values 1 to a line. So let's go to Eclipse. So here's a project that I created. I'm calling it read file. Here's our main method. Now we know we're going to have to do some import statements. So we'll import the scanner, the file class, and the file not found exception. Now, in our main program, we're going to have to create a scanner to read the file. Now, I called my file data.txt. Let me show you what the contents are here. So it's 531793. These are the same ones that were in the PowerPoint. You'll notice when I did this that Eclipse underlined it. And notice what it says is unhandled exception type file not found exception. That is Eclipse telling you that when you open a file, you have to throw file not found exception. And notice Eclipse is happy again. So the first thing we have to do now is to read in the size from the file. So we'll have int size equals file dot next int. So that's going to read in our next integer. Now we have time for our for loop. For int count equals 0, count is less than size, plus count. So here I'm stepping count up one element at a time until it hits size. Now notice I started counting at 0 and stopped at less than size. That pattern is very common in for loops. Now, because we were trying to find the averages, we're going to need a sum, and we'll say sum equals sum plus file.nextInt. Now, the incrementing count is done here in the increment of the for loop, so we don't have to remember to put it in the body. One of the reasons that I really like for loops is the fact that you don't have to remember to put the increment in the body. You will have it in the top line, and it's much easier to remember to do it there. So that's creating our running sum, and now we need to print out our average. So we'll do sum divided by count. Now it's really important to notice that when I stopped count using less than size, the value of count at the end is size. And so we're not going to be off by 1. Notice that Eclipse is unhappy about something now. And this is something that's a little bit tricky. It's complaining about the fact that it doesn't have count. The reason is because I declared count here in the for loop, count doesn't live outside of it. So in order to use it outside, we're going to have to declare it outside. And then, of course, we don't declare it in the initialization of the for loop. So now notice that Eclipse is happy. But we do have a question about whether he should be happy or not. Because notice sum is an int and count is an int. And we know that integer division does bad things. In particular, it truncates. So we better change one of these to a double with a cast. Now, I personally like to do the denominator because you have fewer parentheses involved and because the precedence seems clearer, but I don't care which way you do it. Now, before we run our program, we should probably check and see what the answer should be. So we've got 5 values. 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 7 is 11, plus 9 is 20, plus 3 is 23. So 23 divided by 5, that should be 4.75. Let's hope that's what our program gives. Oh, 4.6, of course, because we were dividing by 5 instead of by 4. Well, I guess your answers are only good as your math is. But that is the right value. So we now know how to open files in Java and read them. So we've now successfully written our file reading program using a for loop. So keep programming.